Well, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. My name's Donna. Today we have Paul from Sustainable Salons with us, and he's going to be talking a little bit about that for us today. Okay, Paul, it's really great to have you with us. We've got some attendees who are listening in, so that's great. If you've got any questions as we go through, I'll just get you to put the questions into the question pane, and I can tell Paul those as they come up, or he should be able to see them as well. So, Paul, it's up to you.
Yeah, look, hello everybody, and Kutumba, thank you very much for having me present and talk a little bit about sustainability, more in the broader picture, because many people do come to me and always want to talk about the real importance of sustainability in general, you know, because people sometimes think sustainability is actually just about the planet, but I always remind people it's actually about people, planet, and profit. And sustainability, you have to incorporate all three of those when really you're mentioning this word or actually trying to implement sustainability into your business. So before I get started down that path, I might give you a little bit of a background to myself and Evelina, and just how we actually even created some of the products and brands that we own today. So a little bit of my background first is that I've been a hairdresser since the age of 11. You know, I started my career really by accident. You know, I wasn't, you could say, the best student in school. You know, I was quite dyslexic and I couldn't read or write very well. So school was not for me, you know, and when you're dyslexic, you really have to learn how to be quite smart outside of the traditional curriculum. So basically, from a very young age, I was already cutting hair. And I still remember doing my apprenticeship at the age of 14. I remember thinking like, gosh, you know, this is great. I'm earning a bit of money, and you know, I thought, wow, hairdressing is something I can do. So I really took off from there, and my career ended up growing very quickly from there. From already the age of 19, I owned my first hair salon, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, about some of the concepts within what I created very early on, because of my dyslexia, I tend to think outside the box quite a lot when creating a business model. But from that, basically from owning a business at 19, at 21, I was then already being offered by somebody to come abroad and start working in Europe. And I took up the opportunity. So I left Australia. I went to Amsterdam first for 2 weeks and then ended up living there for the next 8 years. Which was a very fascinating part of my life, you know, living in Amsterdam, you know, and all the work I did over there. And really from there, it was about then coming back to Australia with my partner, Evelina, where we met in Amsterdam. Evelina has a fashion sustainability background, and she was actually the time when we met, working a lot in, you know, how basically what happens in the cotton industries of what we're seeing in textiles. So basically where your products come from. So you got your clothing, right? You never really wonder actually the whole supply chain of actually how that you know, garment got put together. So Evelina was in that business where she was really studying the whole life cycle of a product. I found this so fascinating because, you know, you never stop to realize about who plants the seed, you know, who sews it together, you know, you wearing it, of course, and then disposing of it. And something that's very fascinating in that space I always talk about is, you know, most of us don't realize that we only play a very small part of that garment's life. You know, we actually don't, you think when you buy it that, you know, that's your clothes and you wore it, but remember, it had a whole life. We can play probably, when you purchase an item, like a t-shirt, you can only play sometimes about 10% of its actual life, you know, and that's even if you wore it, right? You know, so many of us buy clothes today and then they end up just sitting in the closet. So I found this really interesting from Evelina about what she was doing in the fashion industry, and I thought, geez, we've really got to start to look at the hairdressing industry, right? So we're going back nearly 13 years here, where we actually started doing some really fascinating report writing about the industry. And one of the things we did was actually start to look at, you know, first of all, hair. You know, hair was something, of course, when you look at the history of hair, it's just one of those things, right? It grows on your head, you know, you really don't think about it. But, you know, I always looked at it like wool. You know, you got wool, you got a sheep, and it grows relentlessly. It's always going to keep growing, and you can shave it off and you can do stuff with it, right? You know, and when you really look at a sheep, I'm sure 200 years ago, when we looked at sheep, we're probably looking at this animal going, I wonder what we're going to do with this animal. 200 years later, now we have Ugg boots, and you don't think twice about that wool that's on the back of a sheep. So why can't the same thing happen with hair? Because hair is an amazing resource. You only have to read through the history books of how hair is being used in so many different ways. And I remember thinking about this a while ago, in Amsterdam, and thinking, well, I'm going to start collecting the hair off the floor, and I'm going to start to really do some research. And one of the, I guess, funny places where I started to first put hair was actually in, we lived with about 6 other roommates, and I thought, why don't I put the hair inside the furniture? It could be an insulator. You wear fur, but you don't wear hair. But really, what's the difference? And I'm not saying you have to wear hair, human hair, but you could use it in the same way. So I started filling up all the furniture, and it was a really fascinating thing when you start putting hair in furniture. The first problem I actually found was, you got to watch out, because the hair actually comes through the small holes, kind of like how your feathers would come through. So I realized, because everyone was getting itchy and they didn't know the hair was in there. So I would just be like, guys, nothing's, they'll be all itchy on the couch, and I'll be like, shit, I've really got to put some liners inside here so they don't realize that it's human hair in there. So it was one quick thing I had to do. And really from that point is, months passed where they didn't even stop to think about, what was in the furniture. So the pillows had hair in it, the couch had hair in it, and I was starting to realize, look, it sounds gross, I know, but is it? Really, is it? And really they didn't know for months. And, it's just now a warm couch. Now, I always like to give this scenario to people to talk about with hair, because, people don't realize that hair can actually be used for so many things. And when you think about it, you touch hair on the top of your head, right? You don't think anything of it. Actually, you quite like it. You touch it. You're always people caressing their hair all the time, just love their hair. But the minute just one strand comes off, it's like all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I got to throw this stuff off me. It's disgusting. So what happened, right? What is actually happening in our minds at this point? It's all perception at this point, because all of a sudden you're seeing this hair down there, but seconds later it was on your head and you loved it. So really what we need to do with hair is just change the perception of hair, and then before you know it, we're going to be seeing hair in so many different types of products. And let me just give you an example of what hair can be used for. We all know now that hair can be used to clean up oil spills, which is really fascinating. This started nearly over 20 years ago with some guys in America. Well, Otti, the guy that created the Otti mat, which was a fascinating story, watching how he was looking at an oil spill happening and then decided to do something about it. And he realized that hair can actually soak up oil, which I think is just so fantastic, because things have now led from there where now we can create hair booms that can soak up oil spills around the world. Another really fascinating thing that can happen with hair is, of course, composting. Composting is a very unique place where hair can actually play a very crucial part in the compost well because of the volume of carbon it contains. There's also a whole range of building material products that you can do with hair, from bricks, insulation within the brick, which we're finding. So you can actually, I always tell people, imagine putting hair down the cavity of your home. You could actually start to warm up your house rapidly. It'll be like wrapping your house in a mint coat, So why don't we actually explore about putting just a hair with inside the brick, and now we've got an all-in-one insulator. You've got a brick and a full insulator there to warm up your house. And honestly, you wouldn't even see the hair in there because it would be so fine, and really you've got this amazing building material. Another really fascinating place is also even food grade products. It does sound, I know, extremely disgusting, and everyone's like, oh my God, hair in my food. And I always remind people, this is not Lipton tea here. We're not dunking the hair inside your tea. It's actually breaking it down to a powder form, and you can actually use it to prolong the life of food. Now, they've been doing this for many years in China, Germany, within chocolate, because the Chinese have been doing with soy sauce. And it's these bizarre things that you can do with hair. And I think a lot of people should really stop to recognize, and start to say, is it that weird? Really, is it? I always say, do you know what's in your other food? You only have to go to a fast food joint, eat some whatever they're serving, and before you know it, you don't even want to know where that food came from. You're probably going to be much happier in the future knowing that hair's in there rather than what they're putting in it currently. So these are some fascinating places with things that can happen within sustainability. But guys, I've told you a little bit about my background, how I've been a hairdresser. You know, my partner Evelina, who came from the fashion industry. Let me tell you how it is we got on our path and where we are today. So Evelina and I, we met 13 years ago. We started exploring all of these bizarre topics of things that were coming out of the hair salon now, like we're talking hair, you know, you got loads of aluminium foil, you know, with all the foiling that's happening in salons, we realized there was lots of foil, color tubes, plastic bottles, paper. Another really interesting space was chemical waste, you know, razors, all these bizarre items that came out of a salon which couldn't go through a traditional recycling service. So we found that, you know, it's time we actually really step outside and start thinking of how do we create a service that can solve these unique problems that salons are having. So now to go about nearly 11 years ago, when we then arrived in Australia, when I brought my partners from Belgium and brought it back to Australia. Now I always say to people, you got to be careful when you bring someone from Europe to Australia. They definitely never want to go home again. So my partner has now fallen in love with Australia, and this is our home. And basically, when we came to Australia, we did something outside the box for most Australians, because only Europeans or foreigners tend to do this, is we took a long drive around Australia. You know, it took us many months to drive around Australia, and I do warn any of you, if you are thinking of doing this drive around Australia, you know, it will cost you around about $7,000 to $8,000 in petrol, so prepare yourself. So we drove all around Australia, and it was during this drive around Australia where we took a lot of time to think about what would be the most unique resource recovery service the industry has ever seen. You know, because we really wanted to get in there and start solving these problems and really tackling some unique issues. So we started to write up what we see today as a resource recovery service that now collects the materials from salons, and not just hair salons. We collect from beauty salons, dog groomers, clinics, barber shops, a whole range of different types of salons. We collect all the types of waste from their salon. We bring it back to our depot, and then we recycle it or send it off to recyclers to do all these amazing things with it. But really, what I wanted to discuss here is when my partner and I were actually looking at creating sustainable salons and our other brands such as Refil and parts of the curriculum that we write, is that we never got in this business because we thought that's what, you know, I wanted to own a depot, or I wanted to create a foil brand that solved this, you know, foil waste problem. We really just went in to solve problems. So we went in and saw problems, and I'll give you an example of that. So basically, when we came back to Sydney after a long time of now driving around Australia, writing up this whole unique way of a cool resource recovery program, we realized we had to write a report about the industry. So all this time back when we were actually writing this report, we never realized how important it would be today. So to give you an example of that, well, one of the biggest examples of that was when we wrote the report, we realized that aluminium foil, right, was so big, right? We never thought how big it was. So when we started collecting, and I'll give you an example of how we did this, we actually went out to 160 salons and we asked them, could we please collect your waste for a week? So we can write a report on it. Now, I can't tell you how funny this was with salons. They thought we were idiots. They're like, why the hell do you guys want to collect our hair, our foils, all these bizarre things, right? And I said, well, we need to write a report. Well, I didn't want to explain to them too much exactly what we're doing because I'll never get it. So when we collected all this material, one of the things that just blew our minds was the foil, right? There was, so once we completed measuring up all this, I'll give you one of the big stats we had from our report, is we realized that there was over 1 million kilos of aluminium foil going to landfill yearly just in Australia alone. Now, that is a lot of aluminium, a lot. Now, I don't know if you know much about recycling, but aluminium recycling, aluminium is infinitely recyclable. It's no different than gold and silver. It's one of those commodities out there that's been around for a very long time, and it's going to stay around because it is just one of the most amazing materials on the planet. But can I put it this way? It's also one of the worst materials on the planet to produce, yet it's one of the most sustainable to keep. So I'll get into that in just a second. So when we saw just how much aluminium was going to landfill, we realized that there's a huge need here for someone to solve this problem of aluminium foil. So, and to throw some stats out there, because I know I've got America online here, or we've got Canada and some other countries, is, you know, in America alone, North America, you actually go through 45 million kilos of aluminium foil annually. Europe, you go through over 75 million kilos of aluminium just through hair salons. So some massive numbers here, you know. And if anyone knows anything about aluminium recycling, is that you can actually take it to a scrapyard and sell it. You know, it's actually quite valuable. So, you know, this is something that Evelina and I, we were like, why is nobody collecting and getting this aluminium out of salons, selling it, recycling it, and getting it back into the industry, right? So one of the most important things that we needed to do was actually start a product that could start solving this problem. And that really sets us off on the journey of how we created our first product, which is called Refil. You know, Refil was a product really to solve the big problem of aluminium. So we first wanted to make sure that we could produce foil from recycled material, which was very important because nobody in the world had ever done this before, and yet it just made logical sense. Why is nobody doing this? So we created Refil, which is just great. The second most crucial part to Refil was crushing the foil into balls. You know, we had a huge campaign in Australia called How Big Are Your Balls? That size does matter. You know, we made all these fun jokes about balls. Why is this so important though? It's not just a joke. When you take the foil off the head, you've really got to crush it into balls before you put it into any, you can call government or private recycling service that was currently, that's currently operating, which most of you, that's all you have. In Australia, it's the yellow lid bin. I'm sure it's a different color in other countries. But when you actually take aluminium foil to a recycling facility, you know, this is crucial because I'll explain why. Now, when all your waste recycling material, I should say, goes onto the conveyor belts, everything's got to get sorted and picked up through these machines. So steel gets picked up by steel gets picked up by a magnet, but aluminium gets repelled off a machine called an eddy current. Now, this eddy current was really crucial. Now, what happens prior to Refil is people were just taking foil off their client's head, crushing it in a bin, and then hope that it would go to the right recycling facility to get recycled. The problem is the aluminium in sheets was very light, and it would get way down onto the machine and wouldn't get picked up by the eddy current. So it was very crucial, and this time where Evelyn and I, we created the ball, because you take off so much foil off a client's head, you can actually just take it off, crush it into a ball. Again, the bigger the balls, the better. And basically then the eddy current would pick that up and actually repel it off the machine, which now helps recycle this vast amount of aluminium that was going into landfill. Now, these are just such simple things to do within the salon that make a massive difference to our climate in general, because aluminium, like I said, is one of the worst products on the planet to produce, but the most recyclable to keep. So we don't need what we're always saying is, guys, we're already using 1 million kilos of foil in our industry. Let's just keep that. Why do we have to keep producing more raw aluminium for our industry? It is not needed. So saying that, you know, that was where we first started with Refil, and now we've progressed on to actually a full comprehensive recycling service. So just over the past now 5 years, there's been a whole service in play now where we actually go door to door to actually pick up the Salons materials. This organization is called Sustainable Salons, where we actually now tell salons to join on. You get all of our bins. We provide you a whole range of different bins. You can then recycle all of your materials from hair, paper, plastic, chemical waste, razors. We take it all, even ink cartridges, glass, you know, it's all recyclable. So we collect all of these materials, and then basically they all go off into these unique recycling platforms. Now, I encourage any of you, because I won't get too deep into this space here, because I want to talk a bit more in general about sustainability, but if you ever want any information about what we do at Sustainable Salons, please just go online at www.sustainablesalons.org, and you can see our website there. And if you want to inquire for your salon to be part of it, please register on the website, and we'll get one of our team out to you. So sustainable salons, like I said, is unique, and I want to explain why. And we need to really talk now about sustainability in general, because you know what makes this word so important. Sustainability, like I said, is not just about the planet. You know, yes, we have to take care of the planet. We've got to take care of everything that we produce now. I think we should take care of. We've got to worry about everything that's going back and can it be recycled or reused or upcycled. But also what we need to add to this mix is the people part and the profit. So let's talk about people. You know, when you're solving a problem, you also have to make sure that you're solving a very unique issue with your local community. The first part of that is jobs. You need to make sure that what you're doing is creating work for people within your environment. You can't always be just sending things off abroad when you can just do it at home, because jobs is what makes a great community thrive, and you need to focus on that. So providing jobs is very key. So look, like I'm saying to a lot of people now in Australia, every time we provide a recycling bin, you're providing jobs, because people now here need to sort that out and do it locally. Because for a long time we were just pushing it all to China like the rest of the world was, and that is a big problem, because yes, you're providing jobs over there, but honestly it has to be done locally. Because right now what we're seeing is there's a huge ban on recycling now in China, and now all of a sudden we realize we don't have infrastructure to deal with it. Well, this is a big problem. So it's creating jobs locally is very important. Another part I want to add to that mix is you need to also think about sometimes the charitable aspect to providing unique jobs or services to people in need. So I'll give you an example of what I mean there is when you're actually setting up your salon, for example, you're doing something is you have a haircut, right? You know, you probably charge, let's say, $50 for that haircut. And inside that price, you have your utility bills, you have, you know, all of your things laid out, and you probably make around about 9 to 10% profit at the end of it. That's what you go home with. And I always say to people, inside that price, what are you doing? Have you added any line there that actually explains what are you doing for your community? And most people say, no, I just think about paying my bills and all my things and just taking as much profit as possible. Well, I say, well, it's about time you start to think about adding maybe a little price increase, even if it's just $1, you know, 50 cents, you know, that small increase is now dedicated to actually supporting something very local that's really needed. And that could be homeless people needing shelter, that could be people needing jobs, that could be, you know, anything that your area needs. Now, supporting your local area, and like I said, makes a thriving community. So really, every time I tell people, when you're trying to build a sustainable business, you have to make sure that, yes, you're taking care of the environment, but you're also adding in the very crucial part of your community. So that those two things come together, you really start to see a really happy place to live, you know. But then there's also the next part, which is the profit. Most times people never realize that, yes, in sustainability, because always when you hear the word green, or, you know, but most people don't add that and see it as profiteering. You know, they always see this as like, oh, you know, I'm always going to lose money if I take care of the environment. And it's like, well, no, not in sustainability. But sustainability is all about making sure you do thrive and you profit. So how do we do this at Sustainable Salons? We put a whole range of mechanisms for our salons when they join our program to, first of all, drive in tens of thousands of consumers to start recognizing their work, because there is just so much of our population that really care about the environment and care about their people. They care about this word sustainability so much, they want to come and support your business. So we make it our priority to make sure that we work extremely hard in talking to the consumer to bring them into your salon. So we track it, thousands of consumers every month looking for our salons to get their hair done, and we start pushing all these clients now into Sustainable Salons to show that this is the place to be, because this salon is really trying its best to basically be the leader within their suburb on sustainability. What does that do for you? Well, it drives your business. You know, driving your business is key. Now, we also provide a whole range of things like press releases, whole range of marketing material, so you can keep leveraging all this marketing material within your platforms, whether it's social media or if it's the local news or even TV. You know, the volume of stories that we've now been given on TV, it's just been fantastic. And all of those platforms does wonders for your business. And on top of that, it makes you feel good about what you're doing. You really start to feel like I'm positive, that positive energy is now being pushed out of you, and you really want to work harder. And on top of this, you start to really want to be proud to tell your client. So you start telling your client, this is what we're doing, and they start to be like, wow, you know, you're really someone leading your area. So what does that do? Well, that makes them want to go home and tell all their friends, oh my God, my hairdresser, they're collecting hair that's soaking up an oil spill, or, you know, they're collecting the foil and selling it off to feed the homeless. There's all these things that can come out of great stories. So this is really important. How do you make your business thrive? Because many of you are thinking, I want to start to be a more ethical, sustainable business. Well, it's about time you start joining and getting on board with great organizations that are starting to solve these problems, but also starting to get the attitude of the salon to change and start to realize that we need to now add that within our cost. Because honestly, when it's that $50, you know, and you just charge that haircut, are you adding in sustainability or not? Or are you just trying to see this as an extra cost? Because honestly, I think your clients will be more than happy to pay and be part of a great salon that's passionate about the planet and giving back to local community, and they want to see your business kicking ass. So guys, look, I know I've only got 30 minutes, and I see that I've already just coming close now to 30 minutes of chatting. And if you guys have any questions or anything you maybe want to ask me about, you know, sustainability or how we do what we do, now's the time. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Paul. If you just want to pop your questions in to the question pane, and then I can read those out for Paul to answer for you. I have to say, Paul, that I never actually thought about recycling here. I thought about all the tubes and the plastics and stuff like that, but not here. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, what's the difference between hair and wool? You know, it's probably one of the most sustainable materials on the planet, and it's growing on our head.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I've just not long ago had my house insulated, and we used sheep's wool to do that with. So yeah,
wow.
Why not? Yeah. It's actually made an amazing difference to the house, to be honest. It's so much warmer. I live in Wellington in New Zealand, and it can be quite cold here.
I was recently there.
Yeah. So you know, that's really interesting. I had not thought about recycling here at all. So that's something really interesting. Okay, guys, if you want to just pop your questions in the question pane, and we can ask Paul about that. Probably just a question while we're waiting for someone to pop something in there, Paul. What's the most probably the most interesting thing through your journey that you've come across? Perhaps people's reactions or something like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Most people just are always wondered, like, how did you guys go about even thinking up a lot of these bizarre ideas and all that? And I say to people, I think I've been lucky enough as a hairdresser to talk to so many clients and not feel afraid, I guess, to ask questions. And that really has led us down our path, because my partner has this amazing ability to structure and keep things extremely tight within our organization. And I have that ability to get out there and make sure that, you know, we're not afraid to ask the most bizarre questions and see, is it solvable? Is it a way to be solved? And people are like, wow, you're in, you know, off to see the Prime Minister to talk about, you know, something bizarre, or, you know, or you're not afraid to call, like, you know, any recycling facility or China. I'm not afraid to go there and go through multiple factories. And I say, it's just having no fear. And I'll tell you, one of the funniest ones that ever happened to me was when I was in China trying to get the first factories to talk about recycled aluminium foil. And I still remember they said, oh, Mr. Paul, why do you want to buy the recycled aluminium when you can buy the new aluminium? And I found that so funny. I'm like, it's just, we're parallels apart, because they're coming out of poverty, where we're now, let's say, the richer countries, where all we're caring about is the planet, where they just see that as, like, you know, low grade. And I'm like, no, this is, for us, this is the high grade. Yeah,
no, that's really interesting, isn't it? The difference between buy new and and buy something that's been reused.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Something I was looking at the other day was how many websites are looking at the more sustainable options for other things as well. And I'm a bit of a handbag freak. I really like handbags. And there's lots of websites out there now where you don't have to buy them. You can actually rent them, you know, which is a different concept. So, yeah, it's really interesting.
The other day with my partner saying, like, why has nobody figured out the concept with clothing where basically, why can't there be a store just based on a membership, right? Where it's like, let's call it H&M, and you just got a membership, and you're allowed 50 items to start with, and you can think now like a library, you could just be going back with your card, dropping off 3 items and picking up another 3. So you've got 50 items to start with, which keep you, keeps your wardrobe full. But you can always go back and forth to get new items all the time, and of course you can have insurance based on your clothing, which I think is just, that soon needs to take off, because go home and look in your cupboard, right? And you're like, what the hell am I doing with all these clothes? We've just become consumable junkies, with so many clothes and shoes, and gosh, we only make up such a small part of its life, these clothes, where they should be shared or used more.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Okay, well, I'm not actually seeing any questions there for you today, and there's nothing popped up on the screen. So I'm taking it people are either absorbing what you've said, or they're going to come back with some questions. So I'm just going to say that if you do come up with a question after we've finished our session today, please just email us through to the help desk at Katoomba, and we can get that on to Paul to answer that for you, which hopefully that would be fine with you, Paul, if we send you through some questions if they come through.
Yeah, great, love it.
Okay, so anything in closing that you'd like to share?
No, just that if you are on the fence and considering, do I become more sustainable? Is this something that's important for my business? Well, there was a very interesting talk from the head of a very large color company in Europe only a few years ago, where they had to come out and say that they're seeing now that 2/3 of consumers are now demanding some sort of green initiative on their packaging for consumers to purchase their items, which has now caused a huge ripple effect across multiple brands. And guys, there is a huge tidal wave coming, as these big companies are seeing, I'm sure you're seeing, where people are caring about our planet, caring about their community. So honestly, you need to start transitioning your salon into a more sustainable salon, and by doing so, you will see lots more profits coming to your business.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us today, Paul, and thank you to our listeners who've been with us. I've learned some things, and it's been really interesting. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.